Having an exceptional relationship with your spouse affects every single aspect of your life and is crucial for experiencing your dream life together. I'm Rob Murgatroyd.
And I'm Kim Murgatroyd. Listen in on our honest, filter-free conversations as we navigate life and business together without killing each other.
You'll learn by osmosis how to transform the friction you feel in your relationship into a purposeful foundation that will allow you to grow together.
Welcome to the Friday Podcast.
Kimberly Murgatroyd.
I love Murgioli. Murgaleski.
Murgaleski? Did you make me Polish?
Brunelleschi.
Oh,
Murgaleski.
No,
We're trying to change. Murgatroyd is just not an Italian name. We're trying to change it.
You actually can't Italian it up.
No.
No, it's really, really
Murgalino.
hard. No. Speaking of Italian.
Okay. So today what we wanted to talk about is La Dolce Vita and the lifestyle aspects. So we are rounding to completing our second year living in Florence, Italy. And by the way, I can't even believe that we've lived here for almost 2 years at this point. Like, it's crazy to think about that. It has flown by. But we talk a lot about living this lifestyle and how it's changed us and how our environment has really impacted who we are, how we spend our day, our health, our relationships, just our fulfillment and our happiness overall. And lately, Rob's been doing some podcast interviews, and it always comes up. I remember because Chris Harder asked this when he interviewed you for his podcast, and he said, are we just all screwed if we don't live in Italy? Like, what can people do that don't want to move, can't move, or whatever? Because look, it's a tiny little peninsula. The whole world can't fit here, nor does the whole world want to be here. So today I thought what we would talk about is what are the lessons that we've learned that can be applied wherever you live in the world.
Okay, but before we get into that, I have to get the elephant out in the room because this elephant pops up every single time. Okay, so Kim's looking around the room for the elephant, and she didn't find it. So this comes up every single time I do an interview. They're like, okay, look, you're in your 50s, you're 56 years old, you make a move, you're like, I'm leaving my 25-year chiropractic career and I'm moving out to Italy. But what about if there's somebody listening that's 25 years old, that's not in this stage of life? You probably have millions and millions of dollars. We didn't have any of that, okay? We didn't have millions of dollars to make this work.
We didn't cash out on some company and make the move.
Even if we did, that is not the point. Let me explain why. Just come into my common sense corner. Let's just say that you had $5 million sitting in an account, okay? Would it make it easier? Yes, of course. $5 million makes lots of things easier. But at the end of the day, if you pick up and you move somewhere new and you're in your mid-50s, guess what you need? You need income. You need to find a way to pay for your new life. You're going to be stressed as hell sitting there just pulling money out of your savings every single day. Plus, you're still young. Like, I'm still very active doing things. So whether I was 30, 40, 50, or 60, or whether I had $1, $2, $3, $4, or $5 million, it literally doesn't matter. Does it make it easier? Yes. But at the end of the day, you've got to come up with a way to craft an income. So if we decided that we were going to move at 30, I would have still done the exact same thing at 50, figuring out a way to make it an income.
Let me just say this. The reason that he just went into all that is because often people are like, yeah, okay, you moved to Italy, but of course you cashed out after 25 years of a career. You had the money to do it. And he's saying it doesn't matter if you have the money or not. You have to create the income and you have to figure it out, right?
Because money ends. Look, if you have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
But that's if someone actually wants to move to Italy. We're talking about what are the concepts that they can apply.
But even more than that, I'm talking about if you're at a stage in your life and you want to go to Colombia, it doesn't matter. Even if you don't want to go to Colombia, you want to leave. Whatever you need when you're retooling your life for any change, at the end of the day, likely what is going to be included in that is income. So I wanted to set the stage before we go too deep into La Dolce Vita part, that people who are understanding that whatever concepts they want to create, don't look at us and say, of course, they're living the sweet life in Italy because there was millions of dollars. I want them to look at it that we created this life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. We created a life. We figured out what we wanted and how we wanted to pay for it. Okay. I'm taking you back now because not everybody wants to live here. Okay. Not everyone wants to live. So if you wanted to live in Italy, create the vision, create the income, and get your ass here. It's not as expensive as you think it is. And where there's a will, there's a way. But if you're like, I don't want to live in Italy, or I want to live in the US, or maybe you want to live in Colombia or in Florida, who knows? How can you take the concepts that we are learning here and apply them to your life wherever you are in the world? And I think the first one is you have nature, nurture, and neighborhood listed up there, right? So why don't you talk about that?
Okay, so I think there are three things. People talk about nature and nurture, right? Nature is, this is how I am. This is just my personality, right? I can do the best I can to change it, but it's how I'm wired. Then there's nurture. It's like how your parents raised you. You're not changing that. It's just the way it is. But I think there's a third thing. And the third thing is neighborhood. Your neighborhood largely affects how you are. I am very different in Italy than I was in LA. I was very different in Queens, in New York, than I was living in Atlanta.
You were different in Hermosa Beach when we moved there.
Exactly. Your environment, when I'm in an environment in Hermosa Beach where I'm hanging around surfers, there's a different attitude than when I'm in Italy and all we talk about is food.
Okay. So the first thing I think that's important is knowing the neighborhood and choosing the neighborhood because you know it's going to have an impact on you, your life, your health, your children, all of it. And so for us in Italy, living in this neighborhood, it has really created such a shift in our life, mostly because of the lifestyle that we see, the pace of life, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But the lifestyle that is the lifestyle here, the morning walking down the street saying buongiorno to everyone that passes you. I was in this, I think I mentioned this once before, but I was in the dentist's office with Sophia the other day. I've never been in a waiting room where every time someone enters the waiting room, the entire waiting room greets them.
They do that in the locker room.
Formally.
They do it in the locker room in the gym. It's the strangest thing.
It's like, you know, when a chef walks in the restaurant and everyone yells, "Hi, chef," or whatever they do, and it's like a tradition. This is what happens. And it's weird for me because Americans don't typically do that. But that's one small, tiny aspect of how neighborhood affects you. Because when you're constantly greeting everyone in your neighborhood, it creates a depth of community. And so I think the first thing is look at your neighborhood and give it a real good, hard look. Is this a neighborhood that is best suited for how you want to live your life?
Hold on. Let me pause you one second.
What?
Listen.
Church bells. I don't think they can hear
I
that.
don't know if you can hear it, but just even little things like church bells, it affects your state because those bells are evocative of imagery that goes on in your mind, right? The same way, frankly, that the ocean was when I was in Hermosa.
That's it. So you have to decide for you. So the first strategy of how you can live La Dolce Vita is choose your environment with intention. I think that's what it comes down to. Don't default to, we can get a really big house in that neighborhood. Choose your environment with intention because it's going to make an impact on you.
We have a friend, Kyle Depp, yes, and give him he's worth giving an Instagram search for. He's got a great podcast as well. And he lives up north in, it's one of the M's. I think it's Minnesota. I'm not sure exactly, but it's somewhere like, I feel like he's trapping. I don't even know what they trap, but he's like a trapper.
He's an outdoorsman.
He's an outdoorsman,
yeah,
right?
and
it's
Rob is obviously not.
It's like icy and snowy. And
I took Rob on a bike ride in Chianti, and that was about as outdoors as Rob gets.
But that environment, when he's up there, everything, this is it right here, everything that I talk about with Italy, he completely gets and understands, and they're two completely different environments. Because his neighborhood is affecting him in the same way.
All right. So the first one is neighborhood. Take a really good look and don't live by default. Don't live in a neighborhood by default. Plan it. A lot of people just choose it based on where they're going to work, what school is closest. It's so much more than that. So choose your neighborhood wisely. The second thing we've learned here that I think you can take with you wherever you live is pace. The pace of life. when we moved here, we were shocked by how slow people walked. We were shocked by the pace of a lunch. Right now it's tourist season. I feel it's like deer season. It's tourist season and people don't understand the pace of the Italian life and it is slower. So if you sit down to a meal, it's a slower meal. It's not going to be rushed so you can get to your next destination. If you want that, get a panini. And
the only thing they move fast is their hands.
Yeah. And even if you want to get a really good sandwich, like a panino or whatever, that might even take you 45 minutes. And that's the truth. So it is just a slower pace of life here. But the pace of life for us, even though it was shocking at first, we have slid into it and it's nice. We wake up in the morning, we walk down the street, we say buongiorno to everyone we pass. It's like Sesame Street. We get the butcher, the baker, the sweeper, we get everybody. And we do that, we sit, we have a coffee, and then we get to work. And then the Italians go out for another coffee. I mean, yesterday we're walking home and we had to get home. We had an appointment. And one of our neighbors who's an artist was walking into the coffee shop. He's like, come have a coffee with me. There's just a different pace to life here. And this is the thing, like Rob, again, when you were talking to Chris and in your interview, you talked about how here, if a friend calls and says, Rob, let's go get coffee, you'll be like, okay. And you'll just stop what you're doing and you'll go get coffee because there's an importance around community and connection. But if somebody reached out to you in America when we were in Hermosa and said, hey, Rob, let's get a coffee, you'd say, how's 3 weeks from now on Thursday? And so that pace of life and what people do, the lazy lunch, I'm starting to really like the pausa pranzo, which is the siesta. Siesta is the Italian version. It's the nap after lunch. This is a real thing and shops will close down for 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. You feel better and you're ready. And then they eat so late. But all of these things, you can take that pace of life and like, what are we rushing for? Like, just ask yourself in your day-to-day life when you're rushing from here to here, what are you rushing for? I had our older daughter and her friend were here for the last 3 weeks, and they were talking about all of the things that they do, like order their groceries and all these things they do to be more efficient. And I said, what are you doing with the time that you don't have to go to the grocery store and the time that you don't have to do this or that because you're so efficient and everything just shows up on your doorstep? What are you doing with all that extra time? And I said, working. I said, so it's not even like if you said to me, I'm going to order my groceries so I can go for a walk. Her friend lives in New York. Go for a walk in Central Park. I'm going to go for a nice 1 hour long walk in the park and move my body, get fresh air, and decompress from the day or whatever it is. And so I'm going to order my groceries so I can make that happen. But it's not. You do these things so you can stack in even more errands and then walk around like a chicken with your head cut off.
You're making me think of, I'm getting clearer and clearer on what the answer is to this. I almost wish somebody could interview me now because I'm starting to feel clearer about this. This, I think, is the answer to it. You know how like you'll see in magazines, if there still are any magazines left, where they do these like best places to live? What they're doing is they're looking for quality of life, right? So they have this quality of life and they have all these columns. It's like crime and it's walkability and all these different things. And I realized that the answer is what we opened with. It's nature, nurture, neighborhood. The answer is neighborhood. It doesn't have to be an Italian neighborhood. It doesn't have to be Italy, but your environment will largely dictate, I think, your level of happiness and willingness to embrace it, right down to even what you're just talking about, which is like going out for a walk in Central Park.
I think that's true, but I think that, yes, your environment dictates it. But if you live next to Central Park and there's people walking in Central Park, but you choose to stay in your home and not go for the walk in Central Park, that's on you. That's not on your neighborhood.
It's both.
That's what I'm saying.
It's both. But my point is that whether we talk about community, which we're going to get into next, you're right. You have to make the choice to do it. But if you also have to be in the neighborhood that allows it. You can't take the walk. You can't do the community. The pace is, whether you're in New York or whether you're in the subdivision where there's no pace at all, or you're in Manhattan where there's like all of these things are dependent on two things: where you live and you taking action on it.
And of course, but it's like, what do you take the action on? So that's my point. Like right now, I want you to think about all of the things that you are using for efficiency. I'm going to use ordering your groceries and Amazon. And what are you putting in the place of actually going out and doing those activities? Are they just more errands? Are they just more stressful things? So you cram it all in? Because that's not the pace. Like, I feel like when I lived in America, it was a game of survivor. It was like, okay, I got to get here and I got to go there and I got to do this and I got to do that. And then I got to, and then I got to, and then I got to. And it was like this. And that's what you were. That's why I said I liked you better here, because it was, the pace was so quick that it didn't leave room for magic. And even like small, tiny things, like today I walked Sophia to camp. Instead of taking the most efficient route home, I took the long road home. Why? Because it was prettier and I wanted to go for a little extra walk. But I wasn't stressed. Oh my God, I got to get home so I can da-da-da-da-da. So I think learning to live at a slower pace is really great. Like, think about it when you're on vacation, you just have a slower pace. You think you can't do it because you have all this stuff to do. But if you really looked at all the stuff you have to do, a lot of it is self-inflicted, A. And 2, you could find the time. If you can find the time to watch The Bachelor, you can find the time to go for a walk or read a book or whatever the thing is that's not efficient. And I think Americans are so worried about not being efficient that they forget to live. And I think that's a problem. So community is the next one. And this is a really interesting one because Rob and I, of all the things we thought Italy would bring us, we didn't realize how much community would play a role in our life. And whether it's our expat community, our Italian community, our neighborhood, our really close friends, we have built such a beautiful world here in friendship. And there's never a week that goes by where there's not lunches and dinners and walks and coffees and aperitivos and park play dates or something on our calendar. And we never had that before we moved here. It wasn't like that for us before we moved here. And right now, we read a few weeks ago that the Surgeon General said that America is in an epidemic of loneliness. And I was talking to our older daughter and our friend, and again, talking about making everything so efficient. She said there's now an Amazon grocery store in New York that doesn't even have an employee, and you don't have to check out. You can walk into it, you scan your Amazon card to get in, you just grab off the shelves whatever you want. There are things overhead that know what you grabbed, and it just charges your account. There's literally not even a human interaction with the girl at the checkout that says, do you want a bag? Like, there's not even a human interaction now that they're getting to in the store. Or you're ordering everything to your house. Even worse is this new Apple VR headset thing. She was telling me that you can be in this thing and scrolling your phone. So now what are we going to do? We're all going to be in a room together with our Apple VR headsets on, scrolling our phone, making phone calls, watching a movie. You're not watching a movie with someone. You're watching a movie in an Apple headset. Like, this epidemic of loneliness with the increase in anxiety, the increase in depression, the increase in all of these mental illnesses and all of the things that are coming out of that. Dude, there's fucking loneliness. Like, there is innate loneliness where people stay in their house. They stay in their little family pod. They don't interact with other people. They don't want to interact with other people. And I'm looking at it versus what we have here, where I can't walk down the street without saying buongiorno 17 times before I get to the grocery store. And that's human interaction. I was talking to my dog's acupuncture vet, who, by the way, comes to my house. And that's not a bougie thing. It's $30. He comes to my house once a week and does acupuncture on the dog. What else do I get with that? I get a 30-minute conversation with him, and we talk about all kinds of things. And I asked him about things like the newspaper. Okay, so in America, the newspaper gets delivered to your doorstep or to your phone. Here, sure, you can get news on your phone, but most people, they take their, like, if they're an elderly person, their 1 out of 2 or 3 walks they do during the day is down the street to the newspaper stand. because that's where the newspaper, it doesn't come to your house. You have to go to it. And so they walk down the street, they say all their buongiornos, they stop to talk with the people in the piazza, and they get their newspaper and they make their way back home. There is a community here. We go to the cafe in the morning with Gia. Gia walks out. There's one woman who all the dogs know has the treats. And she sits in the piazza with the treats, and every dog goes over to her, and it triggers a 5-minute conversation with the woman between me and her, not Gia, although I seem to think Gia can talk sometimes. And that's community. And so how can you harness this and get it back into your life? I think stop being so efficient. Stop ordering all the things. Go to the store, have the conversation, interact with the people in your neighborhood. Ask the coffee shop person how they're doing. See your friends. I think this is where it's one neighborhood. Yes, Rob, has to be conducive to that. But I think that's where personal responsibility comes in too. And stop trying to be so efficient and get so much done and tap back into the community.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between efficiency and effectiveness, right? So efficiency is going to do exactly what you just described, where you can walk in like George Jetson on your jetpack into an Amazon store in Manhattan and walk out and never see a person. So is it efficient? Yeah, it's 100% efficient. Is it effective? I don't think so. I don't think as a human being, it's effective. So looking at those things, look, what we're really hoping that this podcast will do is give you some food for thought, some thoughts for you to consider about your environment. And sometimes like just moving from the city to the suburbs is what you need, or from the suburbs into the city is what you need, or maybe from one state to another is what you need, or maybe it's another country, or maybe it's like you're in an environment where you've got a ton of people that, you know, have been reaching out to you and want to connect with you and want to do a play date with the kids and want to go out for coffee, but you blow them off and you just don't do it. So all of these things that are going on in your life, just look at them and ask yourself, is this making me a more effective, happier human being, or am I just becoming more like a cyborg with efficiency?
Right. And we can talk about food and walking. That's the last one that I really had listed, because I think that is a big impact. You know, if you've seen Rob on TikTok lately, he's blowing up over on TikTok, but there's your counterpart, your Italian counterpart is also on TikTok. I don't know his name, but he's an Italian who's living in America and he's sharing his stories.
We should do a joint thing.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
And you're the American living in Italy doing your stories. But he just did one that's so interesting because he's back in Italy right now for vacation. And this is related to food. So no, you're not going to have the same food. And I don't mean this don't take this in a derogatory, oh, America food, blah, blah, blah. There are just different actual laws that regulate GMOs and dyes and things that can be in food. Like Italy banned all fake foods, where America just celebrated creating a chicken out of a cell of something. I don't even know. And so they're just different. And Italy takes food very seriously. And you're not going to get the same standard, right, of food in a mass-produced quantity. So what could you do? You could look for small farmers that have great products. There are different ordering things that you can do to get I can't remember what it's called. I got to find it. Remember when I used to do the farm basket and it used to come to us and it was in season local produce? Like, give it a Google. Like, where can you get local in season farm fresh produce? It still had the dirt on it. Like, you can find these things and it might not be perfect, but it would be better. But the bigger thing is things are handmade here for the most part. And so going back to this guy, he's Italian, lives in America, but he's back here on vacation. And he went into an auto grill. And the auto grill is the restaurant off the side of the highway. Okay. So think in America, Cracker Barrel. Okay. Or something like that. When you go into the auto grill, the food that is available, that is fresh, handmade, it looks like the best Italian restaurant in America is the auto grill in Italy. Like, the meal you can get at the auto grill is out of control. And that's just the standard here. And I think that's something to just put in your cap and think about when you're ordering. Like, I go to the market every day, pretty much. I go to the butcher every day. I go to the market every day. I am not efficient with that, obviously. Would it be more efficient if I went once a week? It would, but it would limit my interaction, limit my connection to the community, and it gives me fresher produce. And by the way, what am I saving? Like 2 minutes? Because it literally takes me 5 minutes to walk into the butcher and get what I need.
By the way, this is very common. I was reading something the other day about this, and it said that Italians shop really every single day for what they need. And there's a couple of neighborhoody kind of reasons. One is what you mentioned. They have the relationship with the butcher, one with the vegetable person, and they know what they want. And so they will decide. This is interesting how it all comes together, because you go to the vegetable person and the vegetable guy's like, okay, artichokes are in season. I got some good ones. And you're like, I'm not entirely sure how to make them. And he'll show you exactly how to make them.
Well, just yesterday, you came with me to the produce, and he said, he upsold me. He's like, we have some really fresh buffalo mozzarella right now. Would you like it? And it was ridiculous. And I said, sure. Would you pick out a tomato for me to go with it to make a caprese? So he went and found a tomato, and he came over and he showed me it was a bistecca tomato, so a beefsteak tomato. And he said, cut it this thick. This will only get you 3 or 4 slices. Like, he went through the whole thing with me. That's the interaction. That's the community. That's it in a nutshell, right? And the food. So the food and the walking. So can you find better ingredients in America? Absolutely. Is it going to cost more? Yes, it will, but it's worth it for your health. Walking is something that we don't do in the way that Europeans do. I easily get 10,000 steps without trying here. Most of the time, my average, I think, is 15. And if I go for a walk, like actually go for a walk, it's 25,000. Walking is something that is a normal part of our day. And it's not like everything is super close. We probably do a minimum of 10,000, like I said, 10,000 steps without even trying in the day. And so I think adding that is something everyone in America can do, is walk more, choose to walk more, walk to the store, walk to your kid's school. Like, again, it goes back to efficiency. I think the more we have this conversation, Rob, the more I'm realizing that a lot of the problems that I think are corrected with the Italian lifestyle are based around efficiency. And yes, it is not efficient in Italy, but I think the result is happier, healthier people.
All right, I'll leave you with this. One of the things that I have found is when you're inside the fishbowl, it's very difficult to see all these points that we're talking about. But when we get people to come to places, like when we do events, they come to our events. When we do events in Italy, they come here, etc. You really can see it for what it is. And you go, oh my God, I've had so many people that say, I'm never going to eat lunch at my desk again, because it seems so preposterous after you've spent a week with us here in Italy. You're like, I'm not a cow that is just eating through a fence, eating food. Like, I am going to have a proper lunch. I've had other people that say, you know what? I am going to go have lunch with my staff, because they saw in a restaurant that the entire kitchen staff gets together a half hour, an hour before the restaurant opens to do it. So these ideas are sparked when you intentionally extract yourself from your current environment and put yourself in a new one. And if you want to be a part of that, we just announced our spring trip, and it's going to fill up pretty quickly. You'll look down in the show notes and you'll see a link to get all the information for our May trip to Tuscany. That's it, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody, if you've ever thought about coming to hang out with Kim and I on one of our next Rob and Kim Italia events and you want to learn more, just click the Rob and Kim Italia link in the show notes and add your name and email, and we'll send you all the details as soon as they're available. We are obsessed with this country and how it affects you, and we want to share that magic of culture, food, wine, art, architecture, and some secret magic moments that we've cooked up with you. So be sure to add your name, because these events sell out quickly.